Oh, that's TV.
We're on.
You being virtual with elected. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm Mayor Nancy Adams and welcome to this public meeting on our fields. I want to introduce our Deputy Mayor, Malia Herman, and Committee Member Vic DeLuca, who you all know because we're in Hilton, and the Hilton neighborhood is Vic's domain. So, but we're here to, as everybody knows, especially if you're a sports parent, we've had issues. We are overbuilt, fully built out, and we've had issues with trying to provide the fields for our sports and our recreation, engagement by all the children growing up here. It's a challenge, especially as sports have grown and are for more than just the season they used to be. So there's expectations that we may or may not be able to fulfill for people. So what we need to do with DeHart Field, which was rebuilt, Vic, what year? 2008, 10?
10 and 14.
Oh, both? Oh, yeah. So we've had issues with it. It's a lot of clay. It's difficult with drainage and things like that. There has been proposals, as people who've been here a while know, for artificial turf. Both twice has been voted down by the residents for DeHart Park. So now we're trying to rebuild the field so that it functions, so that we can maintain it well, and just kind of have the field not just for the sports teams, but also for the community. So that's important to us, to have it function and be playable, but also listed. So that's part of what this new design will talk about, and the options that we have for this. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DeLuca, who's going to run this meeting for you and introduce our engineers and consultants. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Applause for it.
Awesome, Mayor. Yay, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. So I am going to run through the meeting's agenda and then say some introductory remarks. So after I speak, we'll have Deputy Mayor Malia Herman come up, and she's going to talk about the outreach that we've done to our Recreation Advisory Committee and the field user groups. After that, we'll introduce Paul Kittner, who's our township engineer and also the Director of Public Works. He's going to give us some background on the field and then tell us how we got to this point where we've engaged VHB, the consultants. And then Joe Kahn and Andy Sisson, who's joining us from Virginia. They are from VHB, they're our consultants, and they'll discuss the project, and they'll also talk about their own experiences in working on similar projects. And then we'll go to questions and comments. So I want to tell you what you'll hear tonight and what you'll not hear tonight. So you're going to hear about a new and a different approach to reconstructing the field. It's going to be a grass field. It's going to be multi-sports, multi-use. It's going to be a playing field. We're going to be working from the bottom subsoil up to the topsoil. We're going to be creating more comprehensive and better drainage systems. And you'll hear more about that as we go on. The concept, and you saw some of that back there, and we'll be putting it up here, is essentially that we'll be eliminating the softball field. And the entire field will be grass from fence to fence. The walking paths and the pedestrian scale lighting will remain as they are, There'll be no change. The playground, the tennis courts, which I guess, Roz, we should call pickleball courts. And the basketball courts will not be affected in any way. This building will not be affected in any way. The exercise area back here will not be affected in any way. So the only thing that we will be doing is working on the grass field within the fence. The new field arrangement, we believe, will allow us to do better field management because we'll be able to rest a portion of the field while the children are playing in another portion of the field, which is very important because the grass needs to have a balance. Our field management strategy will also result in a reduction of field use time over the course of the year. Right now, Paul, we're at 1,600.
About that, 1,800.
1,800 hours a year. That's way too much for any grass field. So when we put this back in play, we're going to manage it in a way that we're going to be saying no a lot more. And we're going to be closing the field. We have to give the grass the opportunity to grow. So the township does, by ordinance, have the right to close the field when it's necessary. When we do close the field, we will put up signs, cones, potentially barricades, chain, because we don't want people on the field. We're trying to rest it. But when the field is open, the field will not be locked. It will be available for public use. Now, we do use a user permit system where if you want to have a reservation to have a structured game, a league game, or a club game, or just a family game, you can get a permit. And that gives you the right to the field over someone who doesn't have a permit. This is going to be a grass field. Let's say it again, it's going to be a grass field. And I know even up to maybe this morning, there were still debates online about turf, synthetic turf versus grass. We're not going to be debating that tonight because the decision's already been made. If you want to express your opinion, you can use your 2 minutes however you want. But this will be a grass field. Following a November 2023 decision by the Township Committee, this field will not be organically maintained. We will use integrated pest management and any kind of low inputs as much as possible. So the schedule is going to be like this. For 2025, the field will be open. People will be able to play. We'll continue to do what we can with DPW, amendments to the field, irrigation of the field. Our design and engineering work on the new field will take place over the next few months. We have an expectation of going out to bid by the end of the year or early 2026, or hopefully the end of the year so we can start in early 2026. In 2026, we'll start the work. Our best time to plant grass will be in late spring of 2026. And then we want the field to rest. So right now we are targeting the spring of 2027 for the field to be back open. That'll give enough time for the grass to take hold and move forward. This schedule is subject to change and we will make adjustments as we go along. But most importantly, we want to do this correctly. And we want to give time for the grass to take hold. So right now, our engineers are estimating that this is about a $2.5 million project. And the Township Committee, once we get to the point where we're a little clearer on the cost, will be introducing an ordinance, a capital ordinance, to move forward on this project. So that will be outside the current budget process. Most likely that will happen sometime in summer of 2025. So here's the decision point that we're trying to get to after tonight. So after hearing from you and hearing from others, the Township Committee will make a decision on the field concept. That's what we're making a decision about. And again, primary decision point is whether we keep or don't keep the softball field. We hope to make that decision at the April 15th meeting of the Township Committee. That's our regular meeting at 7:30 at Town Hall, and also can be joined by Zoom. The field project will also be discussed at our monthly committee meeting of the Engineering, Public Works, and Planning Committee. And that's going to be at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, April 9th. That will be more technical, just, what did we hear? What questions do we have? What more information do we need to have before the 15th? So that's sort of where we are. One of the reasons why we're trying to get at this decision is that we have to give guidance to our engineers so that they can move forward. They're at the point where they provided us some concepts and we have to move forward. So here are a few logistics of our meeting. Number one, we want to try to conclude by 9 p.m. Number two, we're taping the session. And then we're going to be posting it on the township website. All the speakers will be coming up. They're going to be using the microphone, with the exception of Andy, who's going to be talking to us over the Zoom. And we're going to ask that you hold your questions and comments until the end of the presentation. And then Malia and I will roam. We have 2 microphones. We'll roam around. If you have a question, we'll ask you to speak into the microphone so that we capture it on the recording. And then we ask that you keep your comments or your questions to 2 minutes. If we can't answer your question tonight, we will strive to get that answer to you in the next couple days or early next week. Yeah. With that, I'm going, yes.
Just briefly. And where that the grant.
So we received a grant from the state of 85,000. 65,000. Okay, so we applied to the state for a grant, a recreation green open space grant, and we received a grant of $65,000. I believe the contract with you guys is about $75,000. So most of this current work is being covered by a grant from the state. Okay, now I'm going to ask our Deputy Mayor Malia Herman to come up and talk about the outreach that we've done to talk to the Recreation Advisory Committee and the field user groups.
Well, I will be a lot shorter. So we started off talking to our Recreation Advisory Committee, and our Maplewood Recreation Advisory Committee has representation from Cougar Soccer, from softball, and also from Hilton Neighborhood. So we brought it to them, we showed them the plans, the schematic that you see in the back, and we got a lot of very technical questions. But over the issue of the softball, it's not really used for softball, and so there was no concern among that committee about the softball field being there. We did talk about what it means to have a softball field in the community, if residents wanted to go out and use it, but again, it didn't seem that it was used that often. And the big thing that the Recreation Advisory Committee did say very loud and clear was that we should have a public community meeting. So very glad that we're having this meeting today. That was definitely their takeaway, that we should bring this to the public. The other reach out that we did was to MSO Softball Committee, because it's a softball field. We want to make sure softball is located in Maplewood and baseball is in South Orange. We want to make sure we're not taking something away from that program. Now, I can tell you as a softball mom that we never used that field. We were never scheduled on that field. We used it, I think, once for tryouts one year. But I wanted to double check with the committee. I had a phone conversation and we had an email exchange, and they wrote to the entire township committee, confirming that it's not used for softball and it wouldn't harm the program to not have that field there. The reason it's not been used for softball is that the outfield of the ball field runs into where the soccer would be played. And so you can't really, whether it's soccer or another sport, you can't really have that other sport happening at the same time that you have a game coming on. Because some of these girls can hit, and so those balls will go out there. And so it's difficult. It's difficult to have a field that can really have both. A lot of the softball is played at Maple Crest Park. where we have in our capital budget replacing the backstops there, which will make that a lot better. The committee did say that they hoped having this field at DeHart would help other sports like ultimate frisbee, which currently operates a lot of Maple Crest Park, to be able to be at DeHart, and really help softball to have more of Maple Crest. Softball also plays on Memorial and then at the Waterlands in South Orange, as well as over by the Bear in South Orange as well. So so they did not have a problem with removing the ball field. They did point out, since it is our only softball field with lights, that it would be great if the township committee looked at putting in lights at another softball field. And I think that's certainly something that we take to heart and can talk about. So there additionally was a meeting with Cougar Soccer, who runs a lot of the soccer programming on DeHart. And again, I understand I wasn't in that meeting, but there were a lot of technical questions, really making sure everybody has the same concern, right? It rains, and then the next day you go out on a beautiful sunny day and you can't play. And that's the frustrating thing as a parent. I get that. And that's the problem with this field. And so I'm really excited for you to hear what the engineers have to say about the drainage. And Cougar, our outreach to Cougar was, again, they don't use the softball field there, but not having it there would allow for more soccer games to be programmed. So that's the outreach we did. And tonight is obviously another very important outreach to get the input from the community. So thank you for coming out tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to our DPW director and engineer, Paul Kittner.
So push the microphone. Okay.
You're an engineer.
I just run my mouth.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Paul Kittner, Township Engineer and Director of Public Works. Look, for those of you who've lived here long enough and used the field long enough, you realize that town struggled with maintaining the field. We struggled with.
Not that 6 feet, right?
There you go. We struggled as a town with trying to keep the field playable during after rainfall events, and it never really met the expectation, I think, of the township and the neighborhoods, right? So and this is despite large construction projects in 2010 and additional work in 2014. We've had experts out there, Chip Osborne, Lincoln Landscaping, Rutgers University. We've coordinated 2 rounds of sand slid drainage. DPW's performed maintenance through the years. There's been extensive soil testing. The latest was done by Down to Earth Landscaping, and we also did very deep soil borings from French and Perillo to characterize the soils. And the results are really not unexpected. So we saw excessively compacted soils, overuse of fields, large amounts of silty clay loams, and really maintenance issues that were just insufficient. So, despite, and that's not to say that the town, we really put forth an effort to try to make the field work, right? There's been some great efforts to do that. And despite that, it just doesn't perform the way we need it to perform. And that really prompted the township to take a new approach, a new look at this, and consider a complete redesign from scratch. I like to call it moving forward. And the township did apply for a grant for $65,000. We won it, so that goes towards the design largely. And we did interview a number of firms. We selected VHB based on their proposal, based on their interview with us, and based on their concepts. You'll see some boards in the back. There's a lot of different options and designs. What makes this design interesting and different from what existed previously, yes, it relies on the removal of the softball field. Why is that important? It's important because You remove the softball field, now we can have two full-size high school fields, for example. And we can alternate the use of those fields so that we're not overusing a particular field, okay? There's also variants of that concept there that, have smaller fields within the high school field. So we don't have to line it with, as a high school field, you could have smaller fields. It's very flexible. And part of the reason it's flexible is because of the way we're gonna grade the field. It's gonna be on one plane. And we're gonna have a subsurface drainage system below the field. So it's on one plane, it doesn't matter the orientation of the field, it doesn't matter the size, the way you line it. It can accommodate soccer, it can accommodate field hockey and, other frisbee, programs. So it really lends itself to maximum flexibility. And as I said before, there's gonna be a drainage system in the field. That drainage system is composed of perhaps some pipes and media. Porous media, it's also, composed of a soil profile. We're gonna look very closely at the soil to make sure that we're selecting the right type of soil that is both porous but gives nutrients to the grass. And allows the grass to really thrive. The walking path, I think Mr. DeLuca mentioned it's gonna stay the same. That's absolutely true. I enjoy using it. I use it all the time, so I've seen, hopefully, I'm sure a lot of you use it as well, so it's important. We're also gonna have an updated irrigation system, so that system is gonna, feature the latest sensors and controls. Obviously, in the past, we've had instances where the irrigation system's on and it's raining. That's not good. So, that's gonna be corrected. If funding permitted, we'll see if there's an opportunity to also perform other enhancements in the park, like trees, et cetera. They provide shade, they keep the temperatures cooler, they allow grasses to grow. That would be on the perimeter of the field, excuse me. So we're gonna look at maintenance and usage of the fields. The maintenance is critical, and we'll determine if it's something that DPW can do or if we have to put that out. And I think whatever the case is, when you spend that type of money, we're gonna do what's best for the field. All right. We talked about alternating fields. Residents should not run dogs in the field. They have a tendency to dig up the field, create divots. Could be a safety hazard for people using the field. And I think Mr. DeLuca mentioned the schedule, so I don't want to reiterate that. I was fine with what he said. So I think at this time, I want to leave some room and time for question and answer. I want to introduce Mr. Joe Kong. He's the Director of Civil Engineering for VHB, and he has some associates with him as well. And Joe, you can introduce them.
Thank you, Paul. Joe with VHB. I'm a licensed civil engineer, 26 years. I have Andy up on the screen. He is a licensed landscape architect. Chris from my office is also with me. He is the design engineer for the project. I will speak to the engineering, the design of this proposed field, and Andy will speak to the landscape architecture portion of it. So when we first saw the proposal, we put in what we think we want to do. We had an interview with Paul and team about what our ideas are, as opposed to what the township wants. They come together at a point where it keeps everybody happy. We have done some surveying out in the field. We have met out in the field to look at what some of the potential impacts are. We have studied various different configuration and sizes of what we would want to propose. So I'll reiterate what will or won't be affected. The workout area, the playground, the walking path, all of that is going to remain. The walking path may be enhanced. There's some portions that's not in good condition, but by no means will that go away. So you will only see enhancements for those components. The proposed disturbance construction will mainly happen within the existing fence area, with the exception of the softball field, where we're gonna expand the fence to, in order to accommodate the two fields where you can alternate. At the end of the project, we're gonna present the township with a maintenance recommendations and guidelines. And that will help, as long as it's followed, it will help extend the life of the field. So there are two main components for us: the engineering, when we hand the project off to Paul when it's finished, the maintenance. So I will speak to the engineering of it. Perfect.
How's that?
Thanks. Can you just zoom out?
Out, yeah.
I want to point out a few things with what we're proposing. The fence line that you see on the east, the west, and the south are all where they exist today. So none of that is going to change. The area that's going to change is up here where the softball field is. There's also a perimeter drain that runs around the site. What's happening right now, following up on what Paul had mentioned, we looked at the existing soils. There's clay underneath. Though there have been other projects that had rehab, repair the field. Once enough water gets into the clay layer, it has nowhere to go. So what we're proposing to do is a drainage system that's going to run underneath the field. And on the side here is some typical sections. And keep in mind, we're in a concept development stage, so none of these are completely engineered yet. So there will be pipes, the size and the distance between each one of these pipes, that's to be designed when we get into it. So this is one of the typical cross-section of what that would look like. You would have a drainage pipe surrounded by stone. This would be your irrigation line. So what these will be, there will be trenches throughout the field that would have these pipes. And then we're gonna have filter fabric, pea gravel, pea stone layer, and then a layer that would allow for the plants to grow for the root system. Will these dimensions change as we get into the engineering design? Possibly, but this is typically what a lot of the fields that have drainage problems have. When I pass this off to Andy, he will tell you we have done this at a number of different places, all the way up to competitive Division I college fields. So this is not by no means a new system that we are coming up with on the fly for this project. This is something that's been proven to work. So if you can scroll down just a little bit here, there will be a number of these drains. That's why you see 3 here, which is just a representation of a small area. There will be many, many, many more of these drains that will run in the field. And at the edges of the field, we will collect all of this runoff and we will take it to the existing municipal drainage system. Now, once you get to the municipal system, it is no different than what it is doing now, whether it's flooding by overland flow or by any other means, it ends up in a system regardless. So we're not changing drainage patterns, we're not changing runoff. There's no increase in any impervious coverage as a result of this project. So it's the same amount of runoff It's just gonna get out of the field faster into the municipal system to where it is going now anyway. So that part does not change at all. There is one of the stadium lights that we will have to move. That's just because it's by the existing dugout, which is gonna be expanded. So these two fields are laid out as high school regulation size fields. We have some buffer in the middle for coaches, for team area. We have some other possible layouts in the back that shows, you know, you can have a larger field. You could even have just one large field down the middle would be one. But this is just a graphical representation of what you could possibly do. By no means are you bound to anything that we're showing here. At the end of the day, when we're done, this is gonna be a big open grass area that could accommodate any use that you can fit within the space. As far as the landscaping portion, I will pass it off to my colleague, Andy, to talk about his personal experience, some of the projects that we've done. And as far as landscape architecture goes, the grass, the need for it to rest. And as Vic had pointed out previously, just because there's going to be grass growing when we're done with construction doesn't necessarily mean we want to play on it, because the critical time is for it to root down so that the following season, when we open back up, you will have a strong grass in the field. Andy?
Thanks, Joe. My name's Andy Sisson. I'm a licensed landscape architect.
Hold on, Andy. All right,
Oh.
go ahead. We can
Okay,
hear
you got me now?
Yep.
Okay. My name's Andy Sisson. I'm a licensed landscape architect in Virginia. And I've had the pleasure of working on a real wide range of field projects over my career, ranging from, you know, municipal multi-purpose field complexes, high schools, on up to Division I college fields. And yet the one thing that is kind of the one constant through all of those is, unless you get the part that Joe was just talking about right, it really doesn't matter what you put in that top 10 to 12 inches for root zone. You can put the best system in the world in, and if the water goes through it and has no place to go, it's going to be soggy. And when it's soggy, grass gets torn up at a level that's below where it can recover from. So you may still have roots, but if you get down below the crown of the grass, it's not going to regenerate from those roots. Whereas kind of typical wear on a field, you're wearing it above the surface. It may look pretty beat up, but it's able to regenerate with a little bit of rest. And that's why it's important to be able to rest sections of the field and not have them in use 12 hours a day, you know, on a constant basis. And, you know, to that end, it is the fact that this is going to be one giant field of grass that you can move around on really does make a difference, not just in completely resting a field, but in being able to move fields a little bit one way or the other. I think we've all seen that pattern on a lot of fields where you've got the brown stripe that goes right up the middle of the field because that's where most of the wear and tear is. So, you know, for instance, shifting a soccer field up or down several feet means you don't have the constant use in the goal mouth. And all of those things help in the long term. You know, the one advantage we have, I mean, finding out that water, once it got into the topsoil, had no place to go out here made the decisions on this pretty easy in terms of having to put in that full drainage layer under the entire field and having under drains below that to catch all of that. The advantage, from my end is in order to do that, you have to clear everything, which means we're really starting with a clean slate. So we can look at a number of different types of root zone systems in that top 10 to 12 inches of media. And what you really want to look at is, right, it has to support turf growth. How well does the water drain through it? If you put something in that doesn't drain well, you still have the same problems and your drain's sitting down there dry underneath. How well does it resist compaction based on play, right? Compaction and soggy soils kind of go hand in hand. As things get wet, they tend to compact more. And both of them are things that start to thin out your grass. It's a competition for the grass and it just can't hold up to. And then ultimately, what's the maintenance routine? Getting it to look great on day one is one thing. Getting it to stay there is a whole nother. And different types of field systems have different maintenance requirements. But I would emphasize, I think the right term is different maintenance requirements. None of them are particularly harder than others. It's just a different means of going about it. So what you saw in the field sections that Joe showed was a sand-based system. It's a sand peat mix that everything grows in, gives you fantastic drainage, holds up really well from a compaction standpoint. But there are kind of varying degrees of sand-based fields. You can do the entire section up there in a sand peat mix, which we've used in multiple places and been successful with. You can also do a system that's kind of multi-layered that has a sand layer and then a topsoil compost layer below it. Advantages of both really depend on some of the things we find as we're kind of moving along in this. But, irrigation was mentioned. One of the things if you have a field that drains really well in the spring and fall when it rains, when it hits August and you don't get rain for 4 weeks, it can be a challenge to get enough water on it. Recognizing that and recognizing that the better the drainage is, the more the water goes through vertically. So little misses in the overlap of irrigation systems become a little bit more apparent. Kind of weighing those things and trying to balance those things out to give you a field that is going to be as forgiving as possible, but also not create the big issues that you have been dealing with. As far as grass selection goes, obviously differs quite a bit. Where I am, we can use Bermuda grass in a lot of places. Not so much for New Jersey. Tall fescue bluegrass blends tend to be the standard in New Jersey. It gives you a high traffic. Tall fescue varieties have nice deep roots, hold up really well to wear. The one weakness of tall fescue is it doesn't spread real well laterally. Bluegrass does. So for those little spots where you know, somebody kicked a little bit too deep and you have the small bare patch, the bluegrass will fill those in over time. And that seems to be the, you know, the more I looked at it, that's the recommendation I'm coming up with over and over again. And I will say, it was mentioned earlier, the cooperative extension at Rutgers, you're really lucky in New Jersey to have two people within that program who are really focused on high traffic turf grass and sports field turf grass. So grass blends are kind of evolving constantly. So what's the best blend to put down? It's always nice to have people who are doing consistent testing on that in the area that is, you know, relates to your project as best as it can. I guess at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to y'all for question and answer if we want to.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Okay, we're gonna go for questions.
Hey, Greg Lewis, I work with middle schoolers at Quail and Frisbee, along with high schoolers and some adults and some elementary schoolers. And one question is, could you speak to how the drainage and irrigation system interfaces with kids who might be sliding their face across the field?
Who's gonna take that? So the drainage system, can you explain where the drainage system is to the top of the?
Thank you.
And that can come out in one.
So all the drainage pipes that you saw are underground, and they're fairly deep underground. May it be 2-3 feet, don't have the exact number, but none of that will be visible. So when you go out now versus when we have all those drainage pipes installed, it will look exactly the same. You would have no idea that there will be drainage pipes. We're not interfering.
What's the public?
I have three questions, which I think I can compact, one of them is about compaction, very easily. First of all, I heard that you mentioned moving the field as a means of easing the amount of wear in certain areas of the goal area. But what about rotating the fields? In other words, having fields going vertically and horizontally, and thereby also minimizing the amount of using any individual spot, I guess, except perhaps in the middle. Secondly, on the issue of compacting soil, what measures will be taken to control the vehicles that are going over the grass, making sure that there are no heavy trucks driving, on the fields. And my third one was, the planting. I assume that you considered all possibilities, but is there any way that you could plant in the autumn and thereby have grass fully grown by the following spring instead of, waiting a year?
So I'll feel components of what you have asked here. Everything that you see up on boards on the screen are just possibilities of what could be laid out. Depending on the user, depending on the township, they have the ability, should they choose, to orient the field in different ways, different sizes. You could have 4 smaller horizontal fields if you have all younger kids playing at the same time. So none of that really affects the engineering and the design of the field. It's rated all in the same way, no matter how the township chooses to orient the fields. So that part doesn't affect the drainage, the layout, the engineering, or the design. It's more of the end user, what they choose to do at that particular time. I would get Paul's feedback as to that part, because that's not really the engineering portion of it.
So, yeah, right, so as Mr. Khan alluded, you can rotate the fields, you could set it up any way that that we see fit. They could be at angles, they could, picture my page, it's the field, right? It's all graded in one plane. So regardless of what square I draw or what circle I draw here, right, it's all, and there's drainage under all of it. So that's why it's powerful and flexible, because it allows us that option of changing things around. I don't have to worry about the grading of a field and orienting it so that the crown's in the center. I'm not forced to that configuration because it's all in one plane. And that's why it's a powerful, I think it's a powerful design.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And then to just respond to the compaction of the soils, if you're referring to compaction just during construction, there are limitations that we can put down for what you would call lightweight equipment. Will you see trucks driving up and down, unloading gravel? Yes, definitely, that has to happen. Excavating, removing, transporting, construction of pipe, all of that will happen. Now, when we're done with construction, there's a maintenance component of it. And, we will not be contracted for the maintenance of it as engineers, but there are ways to test the soils at any interval regarding compaction, that would fall into Paul's purview within the PPW.
If I could just add, so the soils, we will use at the last stage, certainly the soil profile, the lightest equipment we can. In terms of drainage stone, that self-compacts once you place it pretty much, so it's less, it's more tolerant to heavy equipment, the drainage, so. But in terms of the soil profile, we want to use the smallest equipment possible so that we avoid compaction. If we do compact it during construction, and some of that will happen, there's ways to open it up, open up the pore space, pore aerate, there's slit drainage, there's all sorts of ways to open that up and make it permeable again. So the nice thing is that won't affect the drainage layer below, because that's not really subject to the compaction concern.
Okay, we're gonna go to another question here.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm trying to be really calm. It feels to me that often when we have this conversation about this particular field, people say, well, why are you making it athletes versus Hilton residents, right? And obviously Hilton residents are not ubiquitous, not the same, because they're not homogenous, because some Hilton residents have kids who play soccer, but ultimately Cougar Soccer is a private soccer league. It is amazing to me that we're basically subsidizing a private soccer league for $2.5 million. And no one has explained to me how this is going to impact the playgrounds my kids play on, the basketball court that kids come here and play on every day. Why you guys spent all this time designing these fields and didn't think maybe we should set aside some of the space for the community that has been asking, why can't my son, my son was little, he's autistic. I would have to drive to fields because this field would say it was closed or it was locked down or it was preserved only for the soccer players. So I had to drive him to fields where he could run free because it wasn't accessible here. And you guys created this whole design, you spent all this money and you didn't say, gee, I wonder what we could offer the people who live here, who play here, who bring their kids here, or how this is going to impact them. All I'm hearing about is grass and drainage. Where's the water draining to? Where's it going? That's the kind of stuff that people who actually live in this neighborhood would ask. And I don't hear any of that. And I'm very confused about this process. I understand that you guys care very deeply about kids who play soccer. That is very, very clear. But what is it that this project is bringing to the people who live here? And the permit system, let's be honest, the permit system, if it's pre-designated and pre-allocated to Cougar Soccer, how often are the people who live here gonna have access to these fields to play pickup game, or I was just reading the DeHart, if you look up DeHart on our website, on Maplewood's website, it talks about kids coming here and playing sports, or picking up games after school, or having picnics. We can't do that right now because it's locked up for most of the year, and when it's not locked up, it's designated only to the athletes. You even put a smaller field up there, you didn't think, gee, maybe we should partition this off so the community has access to a green space here. I'm so confused by this because it is not the folks who are concerned about the neighborhood who are asking these questions. It's you guys creating this dynamic where this is just an athletic field for you and you don't think about it as a space for everybody here.
Where's the drain going to?
So it's collected in pipes in the field and it drains to the collection system. That's actually on the south side by Newark Way.
For the sewers. So we've already.
The storm sewers.
You guys have done an analysis about whether or not the sewers here can deal with the overflow.
That's part of the design.
And also, why was it an additional playing area for the kids who live in the local areas, not part of this design? Why is this only for athletic athletes who are playing? And why is it only about shutting down one field so that they can play and then another field so that they can play? And not about designating more green space for people who live in closer.
Actually, we're creating for green space. The whole thing is green. The whole thing is grass. And the people can use it from the neighborhood. There are people who go out there, you know that there are people who go out there, and it's gonna continue to do that. But it is a sports field and it's a multi-use field. We said that from the beginning. So, okay, that's good. You made your point. No. You made your point. You made your point. We have other people. 2 minutes. I asked people to be 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, this question actually sort of piggybacks off of that. You mentioned the current field is used 1,600 to 1,800 hours every year. I understand the new fields will have fewer hours of usage to allow for rotation and for rest. For these town spaces, what percentage of that usable time is going to be allocated for use by neighbors, the community, and to expand the offering of different recreational sports in Maplewood? And what percentage will be used by private sports clubs? How will scheduling be handled and who's going to handle it to make sure that there is a balance?
So that'll be done by the Department of Community Services. They're the ones that manage it. So it will be, again, if a neighborhood group or a neighborhood family wants to come and get a reservation to use the field, they'll be able to do that.
But I understand, I am a soccer parent, so I do understand how this works.
Okay.
Okay, and so we are given a schedule for practices at the beginning of the season because we have to understand. So are those gonna be reserved for all of the teams to be practicing? And then what time, is it that the community gets what time is left? Or is the community going to be built into this original scheduling? The private clubs do not schedule a week at a time.
So that's why we're having these meetings, to hear these kinds of concerns. And, you know, first of all, it's not gonna hold until 2027. So we will be able to make those choices and implement that kind of a strategy in our field maintenance program. This man had a question.
Yeah, I'm Brian Callahan, I'm here in Maplewood, and I'm also on the rec advisory board meeting, and question 2 as well on the drainage. Currently, there are 8 drains around the field, around the perimeter, and it seems like we're funneling everything to one. Maybe all those 8 drains go there anyway, down to the backside, because the area that's the least drainage at the moment is currently basically right behind where we are right now, as you go down to the field or where the picnic benches are. That's the only place too where there's no ground drainage. So if all 8 of those drains go to different places, why wouldn't we be using all those 8 different drains to drain to different places instead of trying to go to one location, which, to pose some of the questions, would it cause a bigger headache in the long run with that one area, and can it all handle that amount of volume? And then 2, is it and will there be ground drainage around the whole perimeter? Because even if you look at what seems to be still on the side where the apartments are, there'll still be a drop off down the hill. Even behind here, there'll be a drop off down the hill, and then as you get down towards it kind of levels off, but there'll still be some runoff. And will there be ground drainage to dissipate that water as well?
So the drainage is still under design, right? And it hasn't been developed yet. We're just giving examples of what this could look like. So that's all part of the engineering design is to do those analyses. But yes, we don't want to surcharge one location with too much drainage, and that's part of the calculation we do.
I just want to also point out, as Paul said, what you have mentioned too, this is the highest point of the site, and this is the lowest point of the site. Putting in a bunch of drainage up there, water is naturally gonna flow from high to low. And there's a system down here that's basically handle the existing runoff coming off the field anyway. So we're not changing the drainage pattern of what is going to that system right now as opposed to propose. As we go through engineering design, if we find something that will change it, we will certainly look into that, but we're not looking to change the drainage pattern of what's existing right.
Question back there.
Yeah, just following up on that point, you are not changing the drainage pattern. But I heard Vic say at the very beginning that you're putting in all kinds of herbicides and pesticides. And if that's going into the storm drain, go back to that question, where are they going? You know, aren't we putting in a massive amount because of the efficiency of the system you're gonna build? Aren't we putting in a massive amount of herbicides and pesticides that haven't been there before? What's the impact of that? That's one question. Second question I have is, you know, we've seen in the past situations where the township committee has to make drastic changes to budgets, right? We just lost 179,000 of federal funds. Is the township committee going to set aside money so that on a yearly basis, the maintenance is going to be taken care of and cannot be cut based on the whims of, you know, whoever may be in office? And the third question I have is, you mentioned droughts. You know, we had a situation last year where we came close to having restrictions. Other counties and other municipalities did have restrictions. What happens if in fact we have a drought and we cannot use water in August? Is there an exemption that is going to be put in place after the field is grown, after the grass is grown, so that we don't have this investment lost because we have a drought?
I want to talk to the first part, at least, the herbicides. So grasses that are not performing well typically open themselves up to weed growth. So that's where you would need an herbicide. But our feeling is because it's going to be a higher performing field, that there won't be as much of a need for herbicides because the grass is going to grow healthier, stronger, deeper roots. So I think the use of herbicides are going to decrease, and any type of application of these herbicides to the existing field right now are going to find its way in the same place, whether it's through infiltrating through the field or overland flow. So they get there now either way. And obviously we try to minimize the use of them. We try to use, it's in the ordinance, we try to use, you know, the least powerful herbicide possible to do the job, right? We want to use.
Well, can I just follow up on that?
Yes, sir.
The drainage system you are putting in sounds so efficient that the number of times you're gonna have to put pesticides in there is more frequent than it is in other fields where drainage is not good.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, because again, if the grass is performing at a higher level, you're gonna have less propensity of weed growth. So you're gonna have a thicker, stronger grass, right? And there's gonna be less weeds.
So the second question about the funding is, you know, no township committee can compel a future township committee to spend it. But we all know we're making an investment in here. We're now allocating dollars to maintaining it now. I believe the future township committee will see the value in that. Now you have a third question. The drought. So this is an irrigated system, right?
Yes.
Has the irrigation. Has the irrigated system. Oh, you mean if there's a restriction? Well, no, that'll be like every other grass. We'll have a problem. If there's a restriction statewide in using water, every one of our parks will suffer.
Hi, Virginia Lamb. My questions are also on water management. So the description is about the sand feed-based field and the emphasis on highly engineered drainage, right? So we are in a drought. We have been in a drought since last summer. And there's no anticipated end to this drought, it seems, if you look on the DEP website. So basically, the balance, even with irrigation, the balance needs to be water percolation during intense rains, which we all know are increasingly happening, and water storage enough for healthy turf. So this could be better achieved with a soil and compost-based system. Whereas, with the sand-based, if the emphasis is on just getting the water through and anything that might be in the water, to your point, then it's just pumping more, to your point, into the storm system, right? So if we have a field that's high in organic matter, can hold moisture, can store water when it needs to, can release water when the plants need it. It's really sounds like it's just a better way to go. So I just am curious as to some of the question, I do have a question there as to why the sand-based field is the choice.
I think Andy talked about a happy medium in terms of selecting the soil profile, but Andy, do you want to speak to that? Did you hear the question?
Yeah, and I think, you do balance it out on being able to keep a nice firm surface that drains and still have a system that'll provide what plants need. And that very well may be that what we come to is a two-tiered system, what's usually referred to as a sand-capped field, right? Where you have a sand layer, and then below that you've got a soil layer that kind of gives you best of both worlds. That's going to be something that comes through looking at overall design, looking at how much water we're really looking at in big storms, and how we can get that to work out. I mean, I think, when we talk about the irrigation side of it, irrigation's just different with sand-based fields in that you tend to run them for shorter periods of time more frequently. So whether it's actually using more water really depends on the overall design. But there's certainly uses for being able to kind of get the best out of both a soil-based field and a sand-based field.
I have a question regarding the one drainage area. My understanding is going towards Newark Way. How will that impact the sewage area or the drainage area on that side? Meaning Newark Way, New Street, all the way over. Will it impact it? And in addition, if pesticides and things like that are going in, how will that impact it? So I remember over the years with artificial turf and things like that, we were very concerned with flooding and that type of thing. And I know the township has been focusing on stormwater, that extra feet, make sure there's no flooding and all that. Well, with this reconfiguring of the field and the drainage into one, how will that impact that area over there specifically with the water and the pesticides?
So that gets modeled, and we make sure, first of all, that we're not flooding that part. If we have to, we'll even consider underground detention and other means to make sure that the discharge point where Newark Way is accepting that water is no greater than what exists now, right? So right now, there's drainage pipes that go to Newark, there's overland flow that goes there just because of the way it's graded in topography. And what we're gonna make sure in the design is that it does not get exceeded beyond what exists now. In terms of pesticides, like I said before, it's a grass field now, we use pesticides now and herbicides, right? So right now, a lot of that is going overland flow, some of it's in the soil itself and getting into the drains. So I would say that our field will probably require less because the grass should perform at a higher level. So I think downstream, we're going to be releasing less herbicides because of the way it's going to perform.
Thank you, Joseph here. So my question is more about equity versus the engineering of the field. So with the closure of one of the fields in town till spring of 2027, are there any plans in place for those clubs or organizations that will be affected, provide consistent equity for everyone? Because the field space already in town is an issue where there's no transparency on how it's been divided amongst everyone that is looking to use the spaces. Because it's not just one group alone. Because I am concerned that some clubs will have priority over everyone else. And who is part of the Recreation Advisory Committee and who is eligible?
So I'm engineering, I don't know if I can answer that question.
That's a good question. I can answer some of that. So I'm the township liaison to the Recreation Advisory Committee, and we have seats open. So I can get you the information to apply, and we would love to have you join us. In terms of the scheduling of the fields, that is done by our recreation, our community services recreation director. And we hear you. We hear what folks are saying about making sure that it's transparent. And that's something that we are talking about, making sure that everybody knows what the priority is and, you know, and how the field allocation is done. So that is definitely something that we're talking about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, besides just DeHart, the other fields that are already in existence, how can that be done for it now instead of waiting till spring of 27?
There are other, so in terms of looking at like the field allocation, yeah, the whole thing, all of the fields, and it's not just DeHart, where our community services director, recreation director schedules them. So that's something that we're looking at, and we're very excited that our Recreation Advisory Committee is going to have a field subcommittee to specifically be looking at this kind of thing. So let's talk after.
I think that is on. Hi. I'm Catherine. I've lived in the neighborhood for 10 years and my kids play pretty much every sport you could imagine. This question is more for the township folks. I think some of us are highly skeptical about the maintenance of this once it's finished, and kind of coming back to Khadijah's point about how this field can be used by the community. I fail to see how maintaining this large grass field can always benefit the community. So I have kind of two questions. One is, if you go forward with this kind of large field construct that you have here, and this gets to the gentleman's, is there going to be an effort to bring recreation sports back to DeHart? Because, you know, there are no rec sports played at DeHart to my knowledge, unless I'm missing something. I mean, my daughter plays softball, as you said, we've never played at DeHart to my knowledge. I've been to every field in this town except DeHart, and I live 3 blocks from it with my kids to play sports. So like, nobody plays sports over here except for one club. And that's why I was a big proponent of different options, because it could be more useful for the community. So one is, once this is over, way beyond my kids' age and rec sports is gone, is there going to be an effort to kind of make it more equitable so that there are rec sports that can get younger kids involved in sports that are affordable and accessible? Because we have great rec programs, but they're all in the other side of town for field sports. The basketball court is awesome, right? My kids use that all the time. The second question is, is there a way to think about, and this is maybe more for the engineers, about maybe creating a smaller, more maintainable field in the middle of DeHart and creating a community space or creating something else? I understand as a sports fan, like my kid plays in Newark, like my kid doesn't even play sports here, you know, because we can't, we have to drive a kids to take our kids to soccer, but you know, at the end of the day, it just seems like a broken record of this giant field that nobody can maintain, nobody wants to, you know, put the effort into it. So as you're thinking about design options, I wonder if a smaller, more maintainable field, maybe one high school size field instead of 2, you know, would be something the town could actually get behind and maintain. I don't know about drainage. My poor husband's gonna be on this committee, so he can help you later. But you know, what I really want to see is using space, and that's why I was very proponent of turf, because I see in other neighborhoods how it works. You can use the turf, you can have grass, you can have kids play on the field. I understand that's not gonna happen, that's fine. But what I would like to, even though my kids are gonna be beyond ever using this field, really, I would love to see it work for everybody, but I just don't I see this big expense and this big plan, and I just don't understand how it's any different than what they've done before. And maybe it's
So the one,
so 2 questions is on the right.
Yeah, so I'll say the one thing about the field being like one big green grass field is that it's a multi-sport field. It's just a big field. We put the stripes on, like we decide, you know, what gets played there. So some of the recreation sports that we do have coming up, when we have ultimate frisbee, which happens right now at Maple Crest, and that possibly could move over if we needed to. We also have field hockey that we're working on bringing that as part of a rec programming, so that could be there. So there are options. The nice thing about having a giant field that we can, how we want it, we can have multi-sports doing that. The reason that, so the field usage, the best way that I've been explaining this to people is that, so the recommended hours to use a grass field is 800 hours a year. And as you just heard, we're using 100. We're way over. We have two fields, then that two fields is 800 on one, 800 on another, 600 gets us a little closer to where we're at. And so that's why kind of having two fields so that you're resting one and using one. But I think that's a great idea to talk about possibly, you know, if we're having soccer, and then nothing, having that open so that's available. So that's definitely something we can think about and talk about, look at the schedule.
Right, and as we talk about, and I think your point about having some other field sports in your program sports is good, and we can look into that. I think you're right. We did move our whole basketball program over here. Yeah, and we now have a pickleball program over here now, so we can continue to do that on the field. The thing is, when we talk about closing the field, say we're playing this week on A field and closing B field. B field can still be open to use, so people want to go out there and fly a kite, go out there and sit out there. All we're saying is you can't have sports on that field. You don't want to organize game on that field, because that's what digs it up. So that's it. Listen, I think I'll be the first to tell you that we need to do better management of all of our fields. And there needs to be some more equitable decision making on who's using it, no question about it. But this is not that discussion. We know that, and give credit to Malia. She's working on trying to change some of that. But this is about replacing a field that's there now with a different model. And I think you've heard, I don't know how long you were here, but you've heard, we talked earlier about a whole different way of building the subsurface so that the top surface will be able to grow grass and heat. Okay, we're going to try to end by 9, so.
Yeah, it's a quick question. I live in the apartment here, and my windows look out on the field, and I wanted to question you about all the scheduling. I mean, I see every now and then the kids going out and tossing a football. Now, it's not an organized football game, but everything happens to. And is that going to be restricted because of the specific time allotments that you want to have on these fields? Or can they just go out there without pulling up for it?
What we're talking, so if we're talking about permitted organized activity, then we're probably going to balance the field. So if one field will be open, one field will be closed. But it can be open for the field that's closed for the organized activities, can be open for some passive activities, like a couple kids or 5 kids throwing a football around. Again, somebody, walking around, playing kickball out there, whatever they want to do. It's just be organized. We're not going to schedule 2 organized things on field A and field B.
Hi, my name is Tim. I have a quick question. DHB engineering team, will you be providing as a part of your design deliverables a maintenance plan that Mr. Kidner and the DPW can use to properly maintain the field going forward? Thank you.
The answer is yes. Yes. Let's make our answers easy. Yeah, that was one of the deliverables. He mentioned it before, that at the end of this, there's going to be a maintenance plan for DPW explaining how to keep it going.
Hi, my name is Shannon. I've been a resident here 2 blocks away for 15 years. I use the park almost every day for different things, and I would like to know, how is the building of this field going to impact the use of all the other aspects that you talked about that are going to stay, but how is that going to impact our access to it while that's happening?
So we're going to keep access to the pathway and other parts of the park open, right? We're not going to block that. And I think we're going to try to limit, the disturbance and the activities as much as possible to the field itself and the area around the field. So, we recognize that people use other parts of the park, So we're gonna do our best to try to minimize any disturbance to outside of the field itself.
Already did your homework, but I had a silly question. Is there any warranty if the field didn't, is there a warranty for a couple of years if the drainage didn't work?
That's actually a good question.
And then the second question is, I know you talk about clay, right? Now, clay can be very stubborn. How far above, beyond, below are you gonna put the drain pipe for the clay? Because between the clay and the soil you want to put in, is there any barrier between the soil in order for the soil not to drain into the drain pipe? And because then you have that lumpy, consistency after a couple of years. So how are you gonna work that out?
So your question is very good about the warranty. So the answer is, when we bid this out publicly and it's constructed, there's generally a 2-year warranty and maintenance guarantee. There's also a performance bond that has to be posted by the contractor. So that ensures that all of the improvements get completed as per the plans and specs. Now, in terms of if the field failed, that would normally be covered under the warranty. We also have to do maintenance on it. And, you know, if it's some type of other issue, we'd have to deal with that. In terms of the clay, we're gonna remove, let's say 2 to 3 feet of material from the top, right? That still has to be determined. But even if the soil below is bad, we have drainage pipes to pick that up. So we ensure that any water that's in that area, in that subsurface, is gonna get picked up, right? So the clay below it really doesn't matter because we have those drainage pipes.
And when does that warranty start? Is it, Paul, when does the warranty start? Is it when the construction is done? Because we're still gonna let that seed, remember, we're gonna let that rest.
Sure.
Does it start then or when we open the field?
So once construction is complete, we would normally accept the improvements, release the performance bond, and the contractor would post the 2-year maintenance guarantee. That generally takes a little time, but you know, when they're done, they post this bond and it's 2 years from that period. So yeah, there's gonna be an overlap and there's gonna be grass growing for a period of time into the maintenance bond. But
Any other questions?
Okay, we have one last comment.
Thank you. Just a few things. I like that you're going to a square shape. I think that will really offer a lot of flexibility. Programs change over time, and particularly if you got one of these little robots that can mark the fields differently, that would certainly help and lets you put in a small field one year, a larger field another. My concerns are just about the composition of the field. It's my understanding that often sand-based fields do require a higher degree of labor, skill, resources, and so on to manage, just because the natural soil can supply nutrients and disease resistance and so on, that because you're replacing it with a coarser material that can't hold those. So I just would suggest as much transparency prior to the decision about doing this, about just what will be required in terms of maintenance, since that, the money for that will have to be somewhere. And I do think that, kind of the day in, day out maintenance too. I mean, there's sort of like big things you do, like the big core aeration and stuff like that, but the top dressing and so on, the attention to the field surface is also a really important element, because if you have a living thing that if you can attend to it will regrow, which is something artificial turf can never do. But you have to have somebody, you have to have the material there, you have to have your pile of top dress or divot repair and so on right there. So I suggest just one little thing, I know my time's almost up. What about this season we're going into? It would be great if the town could do something to save it, the splashy areas that you can't grow in right now. Consider putting a little sod and try out some of the maintenance that you would be doing going forward. Like find some suppliers and so on, try out some practices and see if you think you can handle it. That's it.
Thank you. We'll certainly consider that then.
Okay, so, thank you all for coming out. We are, as I said earlier, the township committee is going to be making the decision is whether or not we keep the ball field and go with this. The first decision will be to go with this larger field. So that's going to be made hopefully on the 15th of April at the township committee meeting. And you're more than welcome to come and express your opinion again, either in person or virtually. We'll also be discussing this at the Engineering, Public Works and Planning Committee meeting, which is 8 o'clock next Wednesday, the 9th. And that's on Zoom, and you can get that information. When you link in, the link to the Zoom is on the website of the town. So a lot of good comments. We have this all recorded, so we can look at it again. We understand the use issue. We understand the equity issues for all of our parks, by the way. And we're going to continue to have those conversations. This is more of an engineering approach that we're taking right now because we have to do something. We have to make some decisions about the field. The use and all that, we're going to continue to have that conversation. And we're going to look at that system of permits to find out. We're going to look at the system of allocation of fields before anybody even knows that they're available. So those are some of the things we'll continue to look at. But that's where we are right now. And again, thank you for coming out. And our engineers are here. If you have any technical questions, you can ask them or you can ask us anything. And we will end the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm not having anything to card here.